I thought it was just another night shift, another desperate call from someone who needed help. But when a trembling voice whispered, "He's in the room." I can't move. I felt something break inside the silence. What began as one routine call turned into a descent I couldn't escape, a call that should never have reached me. Now I understand, some voices don't fade when you hang up. Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the Bed. It happened in late October, on a night when the city was swallowed by a storm that seemed to breathe. The rain had started before sunset, and by midnight, the streets were rivers of cold reflection. Inside the Crisis Response Center on the east side of Portland, only one man remained on duty, Ethan Ward, 36 years old, a crisis counselor who had worked too many lonely night shifts to remember. The building itself was an old converted post office. The fluorescent lights buzzed like insects, and the wind moaned through the cracks of the double doors. At 2:17 a.m., Ethan was the only heartbeat inside that place. He was supposed to have 2 colleagues on rotation, but both had called in sick. He didn't mind. He liked the quiet, even if it sometimes felt too quiet. He was halfway through typing up a follow-up report when the phone rang. Not the main line, the red one, the direct emergency channel that rarely rang at all. The kind of call that usually meant someone had already made up their mind to end their life. Ethan straightened, wiped his hands on his jeans, and pressed the headset to his ear. "Crisis line, this is Ethan. Are you safe right now?" For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then, faintly, a woman's voice whispered, trembling, "He's in the room." "I can't move." Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. "Who's in the room? Can you tell me your name?" No answer, only the shallow rhythm of breathing, then a faint sound, like the creak of a floorboard. He thought he heard a child whimper. "Ma'am, I need you to listen to me," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady. "If you're in danger, I can send help. What's your address?" But the line hissed, and her next words were barely audible. "He knows you're listening." Ethan's hand froze over the keyboard. "Who knows I'm listening?" The phone gave a sharp crackle, and then silence. The connection dropped. He stared at the screen, no caller ID, no number, just the word private pulsing in gray text. He checked the system log. Nothing. The call hadn't even registered. He replayed the recording buffer, but it returned an error message. For a moment, he thought maybe he'd imagined it, a mix of exhaustion and storm static. But he knew what he'd heard. To clear his mind, Ethan made coffee. The power flickered once, twice, and came back. The smell of burned wiring hung in the air. He returned to his desk and noticed something new on his monitor, a flickering entry under active cases, case 24B, in progress. He frowned. He hadn't opened any new files. The case number format was familiar, an old version from years ago. When he clicked it, the system froze. The clock on his desk phone blinked 2:17 again, though he could have sworn it had been nearly 10 minutes since the call. Another gust hit the windows, making the whole building groan. Ethan tried the playback system again, and this time, something responded. A few seconds of silence, then the same woman's voice came through the static, "Help him. He's not safe there." He leaned closer, listening. The voice was different, lower, calmer, and male this time. He rewound, but the message was gone. The recording file vanished from the directory. The rain outside grew heavier, hammering against the glass. Somewhere down the hall, one of the automatic lights flicked on. Ethan looked toward the hallway, his pulse ticking in his neck. He called his supervisor, Sandra, explaining what had happened, the strange call, the glitching system, the phantom file. She sighed on the other end, half asleep. "It's probably just the weather again. The storm's messing with the lines. Go home if you're tired." But Ethan couldn't leave. The voice in his head wouldn't let him. "He's in the room. I can't move." The sound of it was too real. He sat there until nearly 3 a.m., staring at the darkened monitor. The hum of the storm seemed to grow louder, like the building itself was breathing. Then, quietly, without any notification, the red phone lit up again. He hesitated, staring at the blinking light. The line wasn't ringing, only glowing faintly. He picked it up. This time, there was no whisper, just the sound of his own voice saying, "Crisis line, this is Ethan. Are you safe right now?" The storm hadn't stopped. By morning, the entire city felt waterlogged, streets glistening, sky bruised with low clouds. Ethan hadn't gone home. He sat in the crisis center's dim office with a blanket over his shoulders and the stale taste of burnt coffee in his mouth. The red phone was still there, silent now, like it had never rung at all. He tried to convince himself it was nothing. A glitch, maybe feedback from another call line. But the more he replayed the night in his mind, the less sense it made. The voice had sounded too real, terrified, human. And the words still repeated in his head, "He's in the room. I can't move." At 8:12 a.m., Sandra arrived. She looked exhausted, dragging her wet coat across the floor. "You stayed all night?" she asked. Ethan nodded. There was a call. No number, no record of it. But someone was there, a woman. She said someone was in the room with her. And then, "I think I heard a child." Sandra frowned, rubbing her temple. "We've had cross-line interference before. You know how it is during storms." Probably picked up an old emergency recording from another center. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he opened the system log again. The mysterious Case 24B file was gone, erased like it had never existed. But when he scrolled to the bottom of the list, he noticed something chilling, a time entry marked 2:17 a.m. It had no description, no case name, no operator ID, just a single note, connected, 4 minutes 6 seconds. He clicked it. Nothing happened. The cursor spun endlessly, then the program shut down by itself. That afternoon, after Sandra left for a meeting, Ethan found an archived audio backup drive in the locked cabinet. He had access to it as part of his supervisory clearance. The drive contained hundreds of files, every recorded call from the past year. One folder was labeled Lost and Unsorted. Inside it was a single file named 24B_record.wave. His pulse quickened. He put on his headset and hit play. At first, static. Then, faint breathing. A woman's voice came through, whispering the same line from last night, "He's in the room. I can't move." Ethan froze. But then, seconds later, a second voice emerged, calm, deep, masculine. "Help him. He's not safe there." Ethan ripped the headset off. His heart hammered. That was not part of the call. He would have remembered hearing a man. He rewound the file, but when he played it again, there was nothing. Just white noise. The timestamp in the file had even changed, now showing it was created 3 years ago. For the first time, Ethan felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. He tried searching the database by number. The only result that matched the format of the old 24B system was an inactive case file, a suicide hotline report from October 27, 3 years prior. The report listed the operator's name as David Holt, a counselor who had vanished during his shift. The file was marked deceased, unconfirmed. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. Same month. Same storm season. Same time of night. Ethan's office lights began to flicker again. He looked up, and for a moment, the monitor reflected not just his face, but another figure standing behind him, blurry and tall, almost out of frame. He spun around. No one. Only the hum of fluorescent tubes and the wind clawing at the windows. He shut everything down. The servers, the lights, even the coffee machine. But as he stepped toward the door, a faint sound came from the red phone, not ringing, just the quiet rhythmic click of someone tapping on the line. He lifted the receiver slowly. "This is Ethan." No response. Only faint breathing. "Who is this?" he said, his voice tightening. The breathing deepened, then the man's calm voice returned, whispering through the static, "You shouldn't have listened." The line went dead. Ethan stood there, frozen, the handset pressed against his ear. Then, just before he set it down, the display flickered once more, the screen flashing case 24B, in progress. He backed away from the desk, heart pounding. The rain outside turned to hail, clattering violently against the windows. The sound filled the room like applause. He looked down at the floor, a small puddle had formed beneath the red phone, though there was no leak above it. The water was spreading slowly, darkening the carpet in a perfect circle. That night, when he finally left, Ethan locked the office door behind him. But as he walked through the empty hallway toward the exit, every phone on every desk began to ring, one after another, cascading down the corridor in a wave of sound. He ran out into the storm without looking back. For the next 2 days, Ethan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the tapping from the red phone, slow and deliberate, echoing in the back of his mind. The storm had passed, but his world still felt gray and heavy, as if the weather had settled inside him. He stopped answering calls at work. He told Sandra he needed to review old records, but she could tell something was wrong. He didn't tell her about the voice that had whispered through the static, or about the file that appeared and vanished again. Some things felt too strange to put into words. On the third night, Ethan returned to the center alone. He brought a flashlight, a thermos of coffee, and a printed copy of the incomplete call log. He couldn't let it go. The number 24B, the voice saying help him. He's not safe there, the puddle of water under the phone, every detail gnawed at him. He opened the audio file one last time. This time, as he played it through his headset, he caught something new buried under the noise, faint, almost lost beneath the static, a woman whispering in a dress. It was just a fragment, but he recognized it. Elm Street, hurry. There was an Elm Street in the North District, near the river. He knew that area. The houses there were decades old, most abandoned after the floods years ago. The rational part of him said it was insane to go. But the part that couldn't sleep, the part that had heard his own voice through the phone, knew he had to see it for himself. At 11:47 p.m., Ethan drove out of the city. The farther he went, the fewer lights he saw. The road narrowed into a cracked strip of asphalt, lined with soaked trees. The GPS froze halfway there, the signal vanishing completely. He parked at the end of a cul-de-sac swallowed by fog. The house stood at the very edge, 2 stories tall, with boarded windows and a door that hung slightly open. The address matched what he'd heard. Number 46, Elm Street. No lights. No sound. Just the wind pushing through broken glass. He hesitated, gripping his flashlight. He told himself he'd just look around, maybe confirm it was nothing, then leave. But as soon as he stepped inside, the door swung shut behind him with a dull thud. The air smelled of rot and wet wood. The floor creaked under his shoes. He swept the flashlight across the room, dust-covered furniture, a couch draped with a moldy blanket, a cracked picture frame on the wall showing a smiling couple with a child. Then he saw it. On the small table near the couch stood a telephone. Old, heavy, the kind used decades ago. Its coiled cord hung loose, and the receiver rested on its cradle. It shouldn't have been there. The line wasn't even connected to anything. Ethan stared at it for a long time, heart pounding. Then, just as he stepped closer, the phone rang. The sound shattered the silence, loud, metallic, echoing through the house. He froze, breath shallow. The ring continued, steady and sharp. Finally, trembling, he reached out and lifted the receiver. Hello? At first, only static. Then, his own voice replied, calm and familiar. Crisis line, this is Ethan. Are you safe right now? He dropped the receiver. It hit the floor with a dull crack, but the voice kept coming through, repeating the same phrase again and again. Crisis line, this is Ethan. Are you safe right now? The lights flickered. Somewhere upstairs, a door creaked open. The house was filled with slow, dragging footsteps. Ethan backed toward the exit, but the door wouldn't move. The air felt colder now, thick with moisture. His breath came out in small clouds. He turned back toward the phone. Its cord was moving slightly, as if something on the other end was pulling it. He shouted, "Who's there? What do you want?" Silence. Then, faintly, through the broken receiver, came a whisper, different this time. "You were supposed to help me." He turned his flashlight toward the staircase. A faint shape stood at the top, dark, motionless, impossible to make out. His hand shook so violently the beam flickered across the walls, revealing old children's drawings taped near the baseboards, crayon images of a man with no face standing beside a telephone. Ethan stumbled backward. The phone went silent. The next moment, every door in the house slammed at once. The echo rolled through the hall like thunder. He ran to the window, but outside was only fog. For a split second, his reflection looked wrong, his face pale, his eyes hollow, his mouth moving though he wasn't speaking. Then the reflection blinked, even though he hadn't. The old phone rang again, one long, continuous tone. He turned toward it slowly. The flashlight flickered out. He stood there in the darkness, the ringing filling his ears, until it suddenly stopped. Then, in the silence, a man's voice spoke close behind him, quiet and steady. "It's not over yet." Ethan turned around. Black. When Ethan opened his eyes, the air was still heavy with dust and the sharp scent of mold. The house was silent now, except for the occasional groan of wood under its own weight. His flashlight lay on the floor beside him, the beam flickering weakly across the cracked wallpaper. He wasn't sure how long he'd been unconscious. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, black and endless. He pushed himself up, wincing at the stiffness in his arms. The phone on the table was still there, the receiver dangling by its cord. For a moment, he thought it might start ringing again. But it didn't. The silence was worse. He picked up his flashlight and turned it toward the staircase. The figure he'd seen earlier was gone. Only a faint trail of muddy footprints led down the hall, fading near a doorway on the left. Ethan hesitated, then followed. The door opened to a small office, lined with shelves of old boxes and water-damaged papers. On the desk sat a single metal drawer unit, its lock broken. He pulled it open and found folders marked with years and initials. Most were empty. One folder, however, stopped him cold. On the tab, faded by time, was written, "Crisis Response Center, Cases 2019 to 2022. Inside were handwritten notes, old incident summaries, and printed call transcripts. Many were routine, domestic violence, depression, substance abuse. But near the back was a page with bold red ink, Case 24B, Operator, David Holt. Status, deceased, unconfirmed. Ethan read the short summary. Operator failed to complete final call. Audio file corrupted. Last words, "He's in the room." His heart sank. Those were the exact words he had heard. He looked again at the date, October 27th, 3 years ago. The same day of the storm that had taken the roof off the Northern District. The same kind of storm that had raged the night he got his call. He flipped through the pages, finding old reports from other counselors who had worked that night. Some described technical issues, phone interference, strange echoes on the line. One operator had even written in the margin, "Sometimes I hear my own voice calling back." The flashlight flickered. Ethan looked up. Across the room, behind a curtain of cobwebs, a door stood half open, leading downward. Stale air drifted out, damp and cold. The basement. Every part of him wanted to leave. But something deeper, a pull he couldn't name, made him step closer. He turned the knob and started down. The wooden stairs groaned under his feet, each one louder than the last. The beam of his flashlight trembled across stone walls streaked with dark stains. At the bottom was a wide, low room filled with broken furniture and boxes. In the center, half buried under debris, stood a filing cabinet. Its drawers were bent and rusted shut, except for one that was slightly open. Inside were paper cards, each marked with a name and the same stamped word, "Deceased." He pulled one out. Then another. All different names, People who had once called the crisis line. Then he saw one that made his breath catch. The name typed on the card was Ethan Ward. His hands began to shake. The back of the card was smeared with black ink, forming the faint outline of a fingerprint, his fingerprint. Behind him, the phone upstairs began to ring again. Slow, steady, mechanical. Ethan dropped the card. The sound of the ringing filled the house, bouncing down into the basement like a heartbeat. Then, beneath the ringing, came another sound, a whisper, low and broken, repeating the same phrase over and over. "You never left that room, Ethan." He spun around, the flashlight shaking violently in his hand. A shadow moved across the far wall, tall and thin. The voice grew louder, coming from all directions at once. "You were on the line. You never hung up." He stumbled backward, hitting the cabinet. Drawers clanged shut by themselves, one after another. The ringing stopped. Silence dropped again, thick and suffocating. Then, softly, a child's laughter echoed from somewhere in the dark. He turned his light toward the sound and saw the corner of the basement start to glow faintly blue, like an old screen flickering to life. A small portable radio lay there, dusty and cracked, but somehow still on. The static cleared, and a distorted voice came through, the same calm male tone from the recordings. Case 24B, Operator David Holt. Status, transferred. Ethan's heart pounded. The voice continued, repeating, "Transfer complete. Operator on record, Ethan Ward." The light in the basement dimmed to nothing. He felt something cold move past him, brushing his shoulder. He dropped the flashlight, and it rolled across the floor, stopping near the stairs. Upstairs, the front door slammed shut. He was trapped again. He forced himself to climb back up, step by step, into the hallway. The living room was dark except for the faint glow of the red phone on the table. Its small indicator light blinked steadily, like a pulse. He stared at it for a long time. Then, trembling, he reached out and picked up the receiver. On the other end, a calm voice spoke, his own voice. "Crisis line, this is Ethan. Are you safe right now?" By the time the first light of morning crept through the broken windows, Ethan no longer knew if he was awake or dreaming. The house felt different now, heavier, quieter, as if it had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. The red phone sat on the table in front of him, its small indicator light blinking faintly. He didn't remember sitting down. He didn't remember how long he had been holding the receiver, only that his own voice kept playing through the line, repeating the same words over and over. "Crisis line, this is Ethan. Are you safe right now?" He whispered back, "Who are you?" Silence. Then, through the static, another version of his own voice answered, calm and detached. "Case 24B. You took the call." He slammed the receiver down, but the words still echoed inside his head. He turned toward the window, fog still pressed thick against the glass, muting the world outside. He tried the door again, but it was locked from the inside. Even the hinges felt fused, unmoving. Ethan went back to the office room where he had found the files. The papers were gone. The drawers that had been open were now shut tight, sealed with rust. He grabbed the top of one and pulled until it broke loose. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't old, not yellowed like the others. It looked new. His name was typed neatly across the top, Operator, Ethan Ward. Case File 24B, status, missing. He stared at it, heart racing, then turned the page over. On the back, in uneven handwriting, someone had written a single line, "He never left the line." Ethan dropped the file and stepped back. Something about the air had changed again. The faint hum of electricity filled the walls. The phone in the other room began to ring, once, then twice, then continuously, the sound growing sharper, louder, until it seemed to echo through every part of the house. He ran back into the living room. The red light on the phone was now glowing brighter than before, almost pulsing. He picked it up with shaking hands. The line crackled. Then, for the first time, it wasn't his voice he heard. It was Sandra. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. It's me. Where are you? The police are here. You didn't come home last night. They traced a call from your ID to a disconnected number. Ethan opened his mouth, but his throat was dry. Sandra. I'm at the address from the call. Elm Street. I found. The line cut off. He heard only static. Then, slowly, the static twisted into words again, but now it was the calm male voice, steady and cold. You shouldn't have answered. The receiver grew warm in his hand. He dropped it, but the ringing continued, echoing without a phone to carry it. The lights in the house flickered, the shadows stretching along the walls like ink spreading in water. He backed away, bumping into the table. The cabinet drawers upstairs began slamming open and shut. The sound came faster, louder, like a heartbeat racing out of control. Ethan turned toward the doorway, and froze. At the end of the hall, half lit by the flickering light, stood a man. His outline was sharp, but his face was blurred, as if covered by moving static. The man didn't move. He only stood there, holding a phone receiver in one hand, the cord dragging across the floor behind him. Ethan whispered, "David?" The figure tilted its head slightly, and the voice that came back was calm and almost familiar. "You took my place." The lights went out. In the dark, the sound of a phone ringing filled the house once more, but this time, there was more than one. It was as if hundreds of phones were ringing at once, a storm of mechanical cries coming from every room, every wall, every floorboard. Ethan covered his ears, shouting for it to stop, but the ringing grew louder, sharper, until it broke into static again. Then silence. When the light returned, the house was empty. The table, the phone, the papers, all gone. Only Ethan's flashlight lay on the floor, its beam pointed toward the front door, now slightly open. The fog outside was beginning to lift. Weeks later, the police arrived at 46 Elm Street after a complaint from a neighbor who'd seen flickering lights inside the abandoned house. They found the place stripped bare, every surface covered in dust except for one, the table in the center of the room. On it sat a single red phone, connected to a line that had been dead for years. Detectives pulled the old call records from the crisis response center. One entry stood out, logged at 2:17 a.m., the night Ethan disappeared. Incoming call, duration, 4:06, operator, Ethan Ward, status, connected. The strange part was what came after. The system had automatically created a new line of text beneath the record. Operator transferred, case 24B reopened. Sandra resigned a month later. She told reporters she couldn't sleep, that she kept hearing the red phone ringing in her dreams. No one ever found Ethan Ward. But every year, on October 27th, the emergency line receives a single call from a disconnected number. And when the operator answers, a man's calm voice says the same words, always the same. "Crisis line, this is Ethan. Are you safe right now?"